You might ask the question. You might ask the question as to why a software company, which is what Intap is, was interested in researching partner business development behaviors. For us, it's two reasons. Whenever we introduce our technology into a firm, and I promise I'm not going to talk about technology today, we're often asked the question about how it will properly enable the correct or most appropriate behaviors and how we will address the challenge of cultural change. And so we wanted to investigate with some real rigor behind it exactly which business development behaviors we ought to be looking to support. And it's also informing the way in which we develop the platform. The question that we wanted the study to focus on was really to try and understand the behaviors, activities, and time spent of those partners within professional and financial services firms who were having the greatest success in developing new business, winning more clients, in effect, the rainmakers within the firm. The study was very deliberately focused on activities, behaviors, and time spent that other lawyers within the firm could look to copy and replicate and bring into their own practice, rather than more fixed personality traits, if you like, such as the difference between introverts and extroverts, which is something which is much harder to change. We partnered on the study with a firm called DCM Insights, and I'll provide a little bit of context as to why we worked with that particular organization. DCM Insights were founded by a couple of partners, one of whom is a guy called Matt Dixon, who for a long time had researched with great depth and rigor B2B markets and sales effectiveness. His co-partner is a guy called Rory Channer, and Rory had a long background in sales, but had spent a period of time as the chief business development officer at a US law firm called McDermott, Will and Emery, and had been fascinated when he started there, his first law firm, as to the magic, if you like, that was going on in terms of why some partners were so successful at developing new business. And so we felt that they were a good partnership for us to work with in terms of both the rigor of the research that they brought to assessing what made successful salespeople have that success, but also an understanding of the way in which professional services firms work. I'm going to focus the majority of my presentation on the research that DCMI conducted with our professional financial services client firms, but there was in parallel research that they conducted on the buy side of the equation, if you like. And it's helpful, I think, in providing a little bit of detail about the environmental context in which the study was conducted. So Matt and Rory and their team spoke to 100 or so C-suite executives who had responsibility for buying professional and financial services work for their companies to understand changes which might be going on in the way in which they selected the professionals with whom they worked. And this is the most interesting slide, I think, which was looking at the degree of client loyalty that exists in the market and whether that is changing over time. And I'm interested in the conversation afterwards as to whether this is reflective of your own markets. And so the sentiment here is that whereas 5 years ago, these general counsel, if you like, or their peers might have been likely in 3/4 of occasions to have instructed or handed out their next piece of work to somebody with whom they'd worked before successfully, that loyalty or that similarity in where the work goes is declining. So today, those C-suite executives said that it's only in about 50% of occasions that they automatically, if you like, hand out work to somebody with whom they've worked before. And when they fast track forward in their minds 5 years, that loyalty is declining further. And so that decline in client loyalty, if you like, which we might hazard a guess is driven by, the increasing prevalence of procurement teams with outreach into the legal environment, or a greater degree of choice in the market as to the sort of providers with whom general counsel might work, is interesting in terms of the findings of the study. And so I'll come back to that in a little bit. So in terms of the study itself, before we go into the results, let me just walk you through who the study was conducted with and the way in which the data was captured. As Patrick said, it was a large research set. We were very happy to have recruited just over 1,700 partners into the study. The partners came from across the professional and financial services industries. When I talk about financial services industries, it's primarily the investment banking or private capital world, not the sort of consumer banking client base. And that population was selected because it aligns very tightly with Intap's own client base. And so we wanted to focus the findings on the sorts of firms with whom we work. So 1,700 firms, law firms well represented in that mix. And the majority of those law firms were large, full-service firms with multiple international offices and with the partners coming from across those international offices. In terms of the data then that was captured, there were two parts to it primarily. For each of the 1,700 or so partners who participated, those partners completed quite a deep dive behavioural questionnaire that asked questions of them that were both quite strategic in nature, so the way in which they identified the optimal profile of work and client for them, the way in which they sourced opportunities and then progressed those opportunities, and some more tactical questions around their preparation and follow-up for one-to-one meetings, conferences, their use of social media sites, for example. So quite broad-ranging in terms of their attitude and behaviours towards developing new business. And then interestingly, I think for each of those partners, their firm's management team provided DCMI with 6 performance measures. And we can share these slides afterwards. I know it's a little detailed to read. So 6 performance measures for each partner, 4 of which were revenue-based. So the ability to generate new work for their practice, the ability to generate work for others within the firm and other practice areas, the ability to generate new work from existing clients, and the ability to generate new work from new clients. Those performance measures, therefore, were, if you like, an independent assessment of each partner's business development success, not each partner's own assessment of their success. And so when I come to the performance measures, it's helpful just to keep that in your mind. And then the study also controlled for a number of variables such as gender, geographic location, area of specialism, years of tenure, if you like. Crunching together all of that data from across those 1,700 partners allowed DCMI to determine that each of the partners who participated could be placed in one of 5 specific business development profiles. That's to say that each partner exhibited a dominant profile. They did take on board some of the aspects of others, but each partner was classically found to be one of these profiles over and above the others. So I'm going to walk through the 5 profiles, and then I'll come back to how that aligned in terms of the performance metrics that I talked about we also captured. And whenever I go through these profiles, I often see people mentally putting themselves into one of these 5 categories or thinking about the peers that they work with and which sort of profile they might exhibit. The first then is the expert profile. And I should say that just because this profile carries that expert label, there's no assumption that the other partners are not absolutely expert technically in their subject matter area. We assume all partners are technical experts in their area of specialism. The expert label is more about the way in which these partners choose to use that expertise as a means of winning new work. Expert partners in this sense then are, they might describe themselves as being somewhat reluctant business developers, by which I mean that these partners look to identify clients or prospects who are in market but have themselves already identified that they have a need for assistance, that they're in market, if you like, to find a lawyer with whom to work on an issue that they've determined they need support on, and that they have budget and are, if you like, ready to make an appointment. Experts, therefore, look to signal to these potential buyers that they would be the best person for them to work with. And they do that by, for example, distributing thought leadership or speaking at conferences or participating in member organizations focused on their area of expertise. And so they signal their expertise to the market and look to capture demand from those who've already identified that they have a need. In that sense, therefore, they are not especially proactive in sourcing opportunities, but more reactive. The confidant partner takes a different approach. Confidant partners I think of as your classic relationship partners, if you like. They are very focused on a small number of clients from whom they can win repeat work. And they look to win this repeat work by demonstrating very extremely positive outcomes on the work that they do and build extremely strong relationships with those small number of clients. Their networks within those clients are very deep, and they go up to the most senior decision makers in the client. And as I said, they look to win the next piece of work by doing a fantastic job on the last piece of work, if you like. One of the challenges with the confidant partner, perhaps in terms of their peers working with them, is that because there is so much of their success as a partner is based on these small number of relationships, these partners can show some reluctance in introducing others into their relationships because of the risk that that might create. And I should add that one of the challenges that comes with the expert partner is that because they tend to wait for buyers to be in market, they often will find themselves in quite competitive situations. So those partners may be the ones for whom life can feel like a long series of RFPs or competitive proposals. The third profile is the activator partner. These are quite different. They are network builders, but they build networks which are different to the confidant partner. So the activators build networks which will include existing clients, but it also includes future clients, if you like, or prospects from whom they may still be 2 or 3 years away developing the first piece of work, but they look to spend time nurturing those prospect relationships. And they also include in their networks individuals who may never be providers of work per se, but are important in other ways. So they will invest time with intermediaries or referrers of work, and also with others in their target markets who provide market intelligence in some way that is valuable to the activators network in a broader sense. Activators are also quite different to the confidant and expert partners in the degree of proactivity that they show in looking to develop new opportunities. So whereas the other two partners look to position themselves for opportunities which come to them, activators take a more proactive stance and will be out talking to their networks, sharing intelligence, brainstorming ideas around opportunities or risk, and looking to create a need, if you like, in their potential buyer's mind. The activators' networks are also quite different to the confidant in that they are very well networked within their firms. And the activator partners are the ones who actively like to bring their peers into their relationships. And they have a different belief to the confidant. They believe that the more touch points there are between the two institutions, the stronger relationship that makes for. The fourth partner is the debater. They're similar to the expert in as much as they look to position themselves on the basis of their subject matter expertise, but they do it in a slightly different way. So the debater partners, the example that I like to give, if Matt Dixon were here, might be from a different industry, actually, one of the world of recruitment. So the debater in that world would not be the partner who, when positioning themselves for a mandate, talked about the caliber of their network and the potential talent that they could introduce into the job search. But they would be the person who looked to challenge the status quo and to challenge their clients' thinking. And they might do that by saying, before we talk about potential candidates, we should really rewrite this job description. The market has moved on. You ought to be looking for a different type of skill set. And so they challenge their clients or their potential clients' thinking, and in that way look to differentiate themselves. The final of the 5 partner profiles is the realist. These are partners who believe that clients in the past may have been disappointed by the service that they received, or feel that the way in which work was delivered did not align with expectations that were set at the outset, and that there's some frustration and some disappointment that comes from that. So quite similar to the confidant in that sense. Instead, the realist looks to be very upfront, very transparent at the outset of a matter, to be very clear about the objectives that the client has for the work that's going to be done. They are more comfortable, it seems, than other partners in talking to commercials on the matter. They're less squeamish about that, if you like, about talking about budget overruns or the need for additional scope or reasons for which a project may have gone past the original timeframes. They are also, because of their strong inclination to manage the way in which service is delivered, they can be careful to avoid what we might call no-win situations. A couple of examples of that might be, these are the partners who, having understood a client's risk appetite and budget, may actually feel that they would say, I think we're not the best partner for you on that particular matter for various reasons, but let me refer you to another firm or another lawyer who would be better placed to support you. They're also the partners that I think of in my past world of trying to work with lawyers to introduce new legal technology into their service delivery, who I think would not be the early adopters, if you like, of a new piece of technology for fear of the lack of control or experience that might introduce. They might let others go first, and when it's been proven, then adopt that in the way that they deliver their work. So they're the 5 profiles. I want to touch briefly before I circle back to the performance data in terms of how the profiles were found across the study sample. Broadly, the partners were distributed pretty evenly between the 5 profiles, but there's some interesting nuances within the industries. And for this group, the law firm line is probably the most interesting. And here we find that confidant model of partner is found much more commonly than the others. And that makes sense if we think back to that original market data, whereby historically, at least, partners have done well in terms of delivering excellent service to their existing clients, and those clients being likely to hand work out to trusted advisors with whom they've worked in the past. There are some other profiles which are found less commonly in law, the interesting one being the debater, perhaps, where we think that the idea of challenge at the point of trying to win a new matter makes sense. But if you are also the partner who will be delivering the work, constant challenge on every meeting might become tiresome. I'm going to come and talk about the performance data next, remembering that each partner was ascribed an aggregate performance score by their leadership team, and then 6 individual performance scores underneath that. So this is looking at a couple of things on this slide that I'll unpack for you. Each partner, in effect, therefore, was given an overall performance score relative to their peers within their firm, not the full data set. And so a partner was placed in the top 10, 20, 30, 40%, etc. And I should reiterate, but when I'm talking about performance in this context, it really is just performance as a business developer. I recognize that for partners, there are a number of other metrics on which they have to excel. What the slide shows us here then is a couple of things. So the blue bars are the top 20% of business developers within the firm. The dark grey bars are the bottom 20% of performers from a business development perspective, at least. And we can see that all 5 profiles can be found and were found within that top 20% of performers. So we're not saying that there is only one way to have success. You can be successful as a debater or an expert, but the 2 profiles which are found most commonly in that top 20% are the activator, primarily, and then the realists. What's interesting is if you look at the bottom 20% of performers overall, where you see that actually it's in that bottom 20% that the confidant model is found most commonly. And that's interesting if we remember that within law firms, that is currently the BD profile that's most prevalent. And so the overall takeaway here is that perhaps, although you can have success following any one of the 5 models, if you were a junior partner who had yet to, a junior lawyer rather, who had yet to settle on your preferred approach, the activator model is the one that seems to give you the greatest chance of being in the top 20% of performers and the smallest chance of being in the bottom 20% of performers. One other slide on the performance data, and this is just looking at the 4 revenue metrics specifically. So that was ability to generate revenue for your own practice, the ability to export it to others within the firm, the ability to generate work from existing clients, and the ability to generate work from new clients. Here, what we see is this very strong correlation between the greater the degree of a profile that you exhibit and the correlation between the average of those 4 revenue performance metrics. And the takeaway from this slide is that it's only by leaning into, if you like, I'm not a fan of that phrase, the activator profile, that you seem to get the uptick in relative performance on the revenue metrics. The more that you lean into being an expert style of business developer or a realist, although you can have success with those, becoming more of an expert or more of a realist doesn't seem to correlate with an uptick in revenue performance. So focusing on the activator partners and what it is that they do, looking across those 100 or so business development attributes, behaviors, and time spend, DCMI framed this 3-pronged mantra, if you like, of commit, connect, and create. So just to bring that to life for you a little bit, and then I've got some stats on it on the next slide. Commit is this the degree of discipline that the activator partners are able to bring to their business development in terms of preserving time for business development every week and not finding that their time is always drawn into client work or delivery of matters that they've already won. The degree of discipline that they show in following up on conversations that they've started with their clients or nascent opportunities that they might be working on, and the degree to which they track and follow up on meetings or other business development activities. So the commit is the discipline, the frequency, and the cadence of their business development. The connect piece for me is really around the intentionality with which they develop the networks that I talked about. And those networks are varied and broad in terms of the type of individual they have within it, but they're not scattergun. So activators are not looking to build unnecessarily large networks. They're focused on about 100 or so individuals maximum. And they have a very clear profile of individual that they want to have within their network. So it's not scattergun in that sense. And they work to bring people from the outer circles of their networks to become closer and closer professional contacts over time until they become clients, if you like. And remembering as well the discipline with which they put into getting to know their peers internally with their firm, and the ability with which the confidence that they have to bring those peers into their relationships. And then finally, the create piece, which I think would be interesting to talk about in our discussion, I think is one of the hardest of the 3 to bring to bear within a firm. This is the proactivity with which activators generate opportunities compared to the other 2 profiles. And so activators are more assiduous than their peers at thinking about intelligence that they have gleaned from their networks, or thinking about work the firm is doing for their partners and what that means for prospects that they have, taking those ideas out to those prospects or clients, having a conversation and the confidence to have that conversation, and looking to seed opportunities in that way. So the create piece is this, the proactivity around opportunity creation. Final couple of slides just to share some specific data points from the study that support this. So on the commit example, 90% of activators will find time for business development every week. The typical approach, which is the average of the other 4 profiles, it's only about 1/3 of partners manage to find time for business development every week. The example I think is really interesting is the time spend. So activators will balance their business development time equally between new and existing clients. The average of the other 4 partners is to spend twice as much business development time on their existing client base and perhaps overlook the opportunities, albeit they may be in the medium or longer term, that are within their prospect networks. Connect, I talked about the comfort with which activators have to introduce their peers. So 73% of activators frequently introduce clients to other colleagues within the firm. only a third of partners from the other 4 categories will regularly introduce peers into their relationships, and then create 75% of activators look to proactively source an opportunity from within their networks. Only a third of the other 4 profiles feel comfortable and frequently look to themselves create an opportunity, if you like. And then my final slide, which I think will, I hope, Patrick, lead us into the discussion, is the ways in which we're seeing firms look to enable an activator environment, thinking about skills development and where to focus any skills development programs. Some environmental enablement, if you like. From my perspective, technology is just one, but an interesting part of that. But how could firms adapt their training and their client training programs, if you like, or event programs? And then cultural aspects, which is the really important one, and I should probably move it to be first of the 3 pillars, about how leadership teams look to recognize and reward the sorts of behaviors that seem to generate greater success with firms. I'll stop there, Patrick. I think I'm about